The Harper government's throne speech goes tomorrow. Details are dribbling out in advance. Minister James Moore was on the West Block with Tom Clark, and he had this to say about possible changes to the cable TV industry.
We also think that Canadians shouldn't be forced to buy bundled channels when they're not interested in watching all of them. We want to go to a pick-and-pay system across this country. We'll be working to make sure that that becomes a reality because we don't think Canadians should be forced to buy things that they're not interested in consuming.
Steve Anderson is the executive director of OpenMedia, and he joins us now. Steve, I saw an interesting tweet, somebody saying that unbundling cable isn't going to make them vote for the Tories. Is that, do you think, is what's behind all of this, simple vote getting?
I think that the government and certainly Minister Moore have heard from Canadians across the country that we're sick of paying some of the highest prices for some of the worst telecom services in the industrialized world. So I think they're reacting to that, and certainly I'm sure they're hoping to get some votes out of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that they're starting to focus on this sort of thing because it's been years of kind of piecemeal a piecemeal approach to dealing with this, and I'm hopeful that they'll take on the disease rather than the symptoms.
Well, it is interesting because this is the way cable has been sold for eons, really. You know, you want 2 or 3 of these channels, but you have to take all 10 that they're sending your way. I'm wondering how much does this have to do with the emergence of things like Netflix and Apple TV and people just having more choice?
I think that's definitely part of it, but I also think that the fact that a few companies, whether we're talking about television or internet or cell phone service, control upwards of 90% of these markets, and so Canadians don't really have choice in general. So some of them are starting to ditch these services altogether and go towards the internet. And I personally think that's a good thing, but I also think that the market clearly needs to be reformed so that we don't have a few telecom gatekeepers deciding what essential services Canadians have access to. And you know, I'm really hoping that, you know, this isn't kind of a piecemeal regulatory approach, but rather setting up some rules to ensure that Canadians can have access to independent, affordable alternatives to the big telecom companies.
Mm-hmm. When you say essential services, I'm assuming you're focusing more on cell phone and internet as opposed to cable TV.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, cable TV is, I think some people consider pretty essential. Certainly your show is, but I think that there are also, the internet is more and more important, as is cell phone service, and these kind of same companies control all of these different services, and they're actually blocking independent competitors. You know, if you're talking about TV content, there's companies like Media that need access to the content that the big telecom companies have. If you're talking about cell phone service, companies in Toronto like Two Cows are actually being blocked from reaching Canadians, and certainly with wired kind of internet service, customers of independent telecom companies have actually had their services knocked off for a number of weeks recently because of the kind of big telecom companies that are essentially squatting on the raw resources of our digital economy.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the Harper government will go far enough in this instance?
Well, I mean, we've seen this summer that Minister Moore kind of stood up for Canadians when the big cell phone companies had a huge misleading PR campaign. So far it's been fairly piecemeal, I have to say, but I'm hopeful that, you know, this throne speech and the kind of go-forward policies of the government will be to actually deal with the disease, which is the control that a few companies have rather than dealing with just the symptoms, which is certainly really high prices, you know, price gouging and disrespectful customer service.
Mm-hmm. Steve Anderson of OpenMedia, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
All right.